Like this show and want to make your own? Let me tell you about Anchor. It's free, and they have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And now you can even add any song from Spotify directly to your episodes. The possibilities are endless for what you can create, whether it's music analysis, your own radio show, or something the world's never heard before. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to the Vocal Fries podcast, the podcast about linguistic discrimination. And I'm Carrie Gillen.
And I'm Megan Figueroa.
And today we have our very first guest.
Hi.
Hi. So today we have Beth Troutman, a former congressional candidate and TV host, and a real live Southerner.
Yes, very real life Southerner.
Because today we're going to be talking about Southern American English. So neither me nor Megan is a Southerner.
Nope.
I'm Canadian.
And I've just lived in Arizona my entire life, so not helpful.
Well, I will try to help you guys out. Although I've lived all over the country. I was born and raised in the South, and I currently live in the South. So my accent has gotten a lot deeper in the last 2 years since I've been back in North Carolina.
Awesome. So one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about Southern English, well, first it was because my mother-in-law asked us to talk about it, who is also a Southerner.
Oh, awesome. I love her.
But also because it's one of the forms of language that's denigrated, and that's our meat and potatoes. We are going to fight against discrimination. So
this is our first time we've talked about the way geographic location speaks, because we've done vocal fry, which could be anyone, and then we've done swearing, which could be anyone.
Right.
So now we're concentrating on something that's a geographic way of speaking, I guess. Right.
Yeah, regional.
Yeah, regional. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess it's the first time that this has really been something that's not universal or closer to universal, because vocal fry, everybody does it, or almost everybody. So,
and this is why we're bringing in a guest host, because it is not universal. So, yes, we don't want to fuck things up for Southern English in any way. All right.
Well, fire away. I'll try to answer any questions possible and try to guide you through the Southern accent. And I certainly can relate to the discrimination that comes with someone hearing a Southern accent, especially if you're a blonde female, which I am. There is a double whammy there.
Oh, like the intersectional linguistic discrimination that you get with being female,
Right.
I get it.
Yeah. And speaking of that, we just want to mention that we're really only talking about the white variety of Southern American English. There are other Southern dialects, and we will hopefully get to them, but we're setting those other dialects aside for now.
Yes, because they're going to be disparaged differently, right?
Yes.
There's going to be other intersectional things at play. So
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay, cool.
Okay, so let's talk about how you feel. Like, so for example, you were in the television world, and I'm certain that there's some interesting stories you could tell us about having a Southern accent in that world.
It has been a strange experience. I was told when I first started in television, which the first show that I ever did was a morning show here in Charlotte, North Carolina. So having a Southern accent in a Southern city was not necessarily a bad thing. And in fact, most people were so used to hearing that non-regional dialect on television that suddenly when I was a local girl on local television, people were super excited about it because I sounded like everybody around here sounds.
Right.
But shortly after that, as I was trying to move my career forward, the next position that I held was a morning show for the Lifetime Network. And that's a national show, so you're talking about a show that the entire country gets to see. And people said to me that I needed to really work on my accent, that I needed to have that non-regional dialect. That's what they were telling me at first. But I'm not very good at being being someone who I'm not. I'm not good at being anyone but myself. So trying to completely get rid of an accent was something completely foreign to me, and something I couldn't really do. Living in a different part of the country, I lived in Arizona, I've lived in Los Angeles, I've lived and worked in South Florida. I lose my accent a little bit, and I think that's just because I hear people talking. I start, I guess, maybe mimicking other people's accents. So mine is much thicker again now that I'm back in the South. But being told that you won't be successful in a particular field because of your accent, there's something really heartbreaking about that in the beginning, because you're shutting out an entire section of the population, and you're telling me that I'm not, I heard that I wasn't going to be successful just because of that. It wasn't the tone of my voice, it wasn't my look, it wasn't my personality. It was literally that people, and I've heard this more times than I would like to admit, that people will underestimate you if you have a Southern accent, that people will think you are kind and trustworthy, but they won't necessarily think that you are an intelligent person. And that was a big slap in the face.
There's actually a study on that, right? Mm-hmm. They looked not only at adults but kids. Yeah. And they found that even 9 to 10-year-old kids are already internalizing these negative stereotypes about the way that they speak. So these Southern kids are saying that Northern speech is more respected, that people that speak non-Southern English are more in charge, and they do have also the stereotype that Southerners are kinder. Mm-hmm. So when you hear a Southern accent, someone's kind, but they're not necessarily smart, and it's so sad to me. That's so sad.
I think that has a lot to do with the industry that I work in, because if you see people in charge, like news anchors on television, or you see people in films whose characters are high powered, or who are funny, or who are lead roles, you very rarely hear a Southern accent. You very rarely hear someone have that Southern drawl, saying the I and the my, the light and the night, all the words that we tend to draw out. And our accent is kind of sing-songy. There's something melodic about it. There's something that it definitely is, people have described it, certainly to me, lazy. They say it's a lazy way of speaking, which maybe that's why people think that you're friendly, because you're just tired. I don't know. But, if you think about it, though, since I was born in 1977. In my lifetime, we had Jimmy Carter as a president. We had Bill Clinton as a president. We had George W. Bush as a president. We had these people who were, the leaders of the free world, who had Southern accents. They were men, which is, it's in and of itself, it's its own thing. But that tells you something about trustworthiness, I think, that people thought that these guys, could be trusted as leaders.
I absolutely agree with that. That's part of the reason why people wanted them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to mention that I think it's the University of Chicago psychologist Catherine Kinsler and Jasmine DeJesus who did that study. So
I read that study. Well, it was really remarkable that the Southern kids didn't have as much of a problem with the Southern accent as the kids from Chicago, because they never hear a Southern accent unless it's a rerun of Gomer Pyle or Andy Griffith or something.
Or Cletus, the slack-jawed yokel.
Right.
Some folk will never eat a skunk, but then again some folk will, like Cletus, the slack-jawed yokel.
Right, or Reese Witherspoon in Sweet Home Alabama, where they're like, "You've got a baby in a bar."
Oh, yeah, yes, that is an iconic line. Yeah.
Oh, fancy! You look like you just stepped out of a magazine. Oh, well, thank you. Look at you. You have a baby in a bar. Now I got 3 more at home. This one's still on the tip, so I can cart him anywhere.
Well, yeah, and then those same kids were completely okay with the Northern accent, the Chicago accent.
Right.
Because they hear it on TV all the time, and it's in movies.
You hear it all the time.
Right? And I wonder about that, because you were talking about it. What we see portrayed in movies and by, like, stand-up comedians is oftentimes all people like me, West Coast people, know about the South. And I wonder what you think about that.
You mean the portrayal of the The dumb Southerner, or
I guess there's like two things there that that people on the West Coast, we have our like preconceived notions about Southerners, and that's not fair, especially since most things that we know about them are from movies or these kind of media. And also, I see a lot of times that it is the dumb Southerner stereotype that is portrayed in movies.
Yeah. There's something that's really, I think I probably speak for the people, especially the people who like to pride themselves on being educated, even having advanced degrees. It is a tough thing to swallow. I a few years ago, I guess it's been maybe 10 years or so since Kelly Pickler was on American Idol, and she really played up the Southern accent and kind of played up the sweet. I mean, she seemed, everybody just wanted to hug her, but she also was on Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader and thought that Paris was the capital of Europe, the country, and didn't know that Turkey was a country. And
this might be a stupid question.
I'm guessing it's probably going to be.
Blake, I thought Europe was a country. Budapest? I never even heard of that.
But
I know they speak French there, don't they? I want to say, is France a country? I don't know what I'm doing.
There are those things that certainly the media has played up when it comes to Southerners, and that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, especially if you are trying really hard to be a successful person, or if you're any kind of business where you are dealing with people all over the country and having conversations with people all over the country. You don't want to be taken less seriously because of how you speak. However, there is one thing that I have noticed that's happened in my professional life, oftentimes off the camera, is that because I have a Southern accent, the bar is set lower for me, and so it's not hard to impress, because people haven't expected me to be impressive, and I say that with a lot of humor. I say that that happens. It's happened more times than I would like to admit, that I wasn't expected to be particularly intelligent or articulate.
Oh, do you think in your industry too, the bar is set low just being a female as well? Or is that not as true in the TV industry?
I think the TV industry is more, it's hard to articulate this well, but the TV industry is so focused on physical appearance first. When it comes to women, there are men who have, are in their 60s and 70s who are still sitting on an anchor desk, or who have been, that old and sitting on an anchor desk. And you very rarely see women in those positions who are of that age. And if they're, heading that age, there's tons of plastic surgery and all kinds of makeup, and, the lips get blown up, and that whole women don't age as well as men kind of thing. So there's kind of a double whammy when it comes to television, because you're dealing with not only whatever regional accent that you have, but then you're also dealing with the physical aspects that go along with a visual medium such as television, and the standards aren't the same for men and for women. And I would imagine that that's probably true with an accent as well. However, it might go the opposite way with a man with a Southern accent. A woman with a Southern accent might find success a little more easily with a Southern accent than possibly a man, and I think that's a level of discrimination, and certainly can be considered sexism.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it sounds kind of like the Southern accent plus being a woman. It's like, well, those two things sort of go together. Women aren't considered to be as smart as men, which is obviously false,
or as powerful.
Yeah. Right. And so it's okay. We want women to be kind and nice. So like a Southern woman, that's okay, but a Southern man is like going against that. So maybe that's why. Yeah.
It is, and it's an interesting thing to think about, because the Southern accent has such a history. I mean, it's kind of a combination of British English and the language that, and what a terrible history we have here, but the language that slaves brought over from their own African cultures. And it's kind of this, I think that's where a lot of people say that this Southern drawl came from, was this kind of mix of these two cultures colliding for generations. And we do have a really, really dark past here in the South, and I think that probably lends itself to after the Civil War and during Reconstruction, when the South here, we were having so many financial problems. Most people lived in rural areas, and people were dealing with poverty, and I think that probably played into that initial stereotype that Southerners weren't quite as smart as other folks in the country. And I again, it ties to a very dark past that we have here.
So there's another study, probably not as well done as the one from the University of Chicago, but there's another study done by Cupid.com where people apparently considered the Southern American accent to be a sign of sexism.
To be a sign of sexism?
That's...
Yeah, which I know is dumb.
That doesn't... that works not. That not work. That I can't even speak. I mean... I don't have a...
You just can't even.
I can't even though it's not my accent. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, what does that even mean? Having a Southern accent means that you're sexist?
I think what's going on is people think that Southerners are more sexist than Northerners, which again, probably not true.
Well, but it could go to the, I guess people thinking that we're generationally behind the times. Here, that we're not as progressive in the South. And there are certainly, I mean, I live in a major city, and it's the number 3 financial hub in the country. I live in a major metropolitan area, and Raleigh, North Carolina also is incredibly progressive. So there are certainly really progressive parts of the South that are more similar to, in thought, really a New York or a Chicago or a Boston or a Los Angeles, even a San Francisco. But I will say I ran for Congress when I was 27 years old here. I was the first woman to ever run in my district, which was District 8. 2004, first woman to ever run. And I was a single female, and my degrees are in political science and women's studies with a focus on feminist theory, which is quite progressive for this particular area. But when I got into rural North Carolina, which my district was about 10 counties, and I had I had part of Charlotte, which is the wealthiest city in our state, and then I had part of Mecklenburg County, which is the wealthiest county in our state, and then I had part of I had all of Hope County, which is one of the most rural counties in our state. And whenever I would campaign in the more rural areas, I almost on a daily basis got the question, why are you running for Congress and not looking for a husband?
Ugh.
Or how are you going to, if you get elected, how are you going to get anything done in Washington if you don't have a man to run your ideas by?
Oh.
And I got that more than once, and quite often, as a matter of fact. And they weren't, the folks who asked me that weren't bad people. They just really still believed that it was more important for me as a female to be looking for a husband than anything else, that was the thing that was going to provide me security, or that was what success meant for a woman. And so I can understand, I guess, if that's what that Cupid study means, because there is a level of that. But I don't know that doesn't exist in other parts of the country. I haven't run for office in other parts of the country. I've only done it here in North Carolina. But I do know that was real and that existed. And I'm still, since then, no other woman has run in that district again, still, which is a really interesting thing. You want to have more women in power, but there are not necessarily a lot of women stepping up here in North Carolina. Although we did have a female governor. We had Beverly Perdue. Let's see, we had a few years ago. When did she first get elected? I think 2004 was she running. I think that was that same year.
So you've only had one female governor in North Carolina?
Yeah, so far. Our Secretary of State is a woman, Elaine Marshall. She is a female and a pretty amazing speaker and a very powerful, very smart woman. But it has traditionally been a very male, and that's true in a lot of parts of the country. It's a very male-dominated field, but being a Southern single woman was an interesting thing when running for office here.
I bet. So one of the things that has come up a lot in this conversation is drawl, and I just wanted to talk about what that actually
Yeah.
means, because I never really understood. I knew it sort of described the speech pattern, but I wasn't really sure what it meant. And to simplify it a lot, what it really means is the way that the vowels are pronounced. So what would be like a plain simple vowel in a northern dialect becomes like what's it called, diphthong, so 2 vowels put together, or even a triphthong, so 3 vowels put together. So for example, meal becomes like meal, like a really
Meal.
or
Yeah.
aya instead of just or whatever. So that's what it is. It's like creating a longer vowel with multiple pieces in them, which I found kind of interesting and kind of fun.
Yeah.
But I hadn't really thought about it before.
I love it. I was helping a friend of mine as an actor in Los Angeles, and he got a part on I think it's called the American Crime Story, that show that was on ABC, and his character was supposed to be from North Carolina, so he would send me all of his scripts, and I would read them into my voice memo on my phone and mail him the tracks so that he could listen to a real Southern accent saying some of the words, because a lot of people think that, and there are certain parts of here in North Carolina, especially the mountains, where they do draw out the syllables that we all do, the I instead of I, we say I, like I want a piece of pie, or I want, my eye is itching, or, those kinds of things. But we also oddly say light and night and right and fight. But in the mountains of North Carolina, you hear more right and night and fight and light. So it's also, even in this state, there's a regional accent, but I's and A's and O's get changed up quite a bit. And, instead of, I don't even know if I can say phone the way that most people say phone, we say phone or home, or, instead of home. I don't know. Home is the way that I say it. And I've had to, especially on television, try to correct some of those vowels, but you get so used to it, and it does feel really good in your mouth. It almost feels like you're eating the words in a fun way. I had this book of poetry when I was in college called The Language They Speak is Things to Eat, and I didn't understand that title until really recently, when I really started thinking about the way that that you speak, the way that your accent comes out of your mouth, and it almost feels delicious to say, I want a piece of pie. It's almost onomatopoetic. That pie to me sounds like what pie is.
So I was reading also, there's the Grits Guide to Life, the Girls Raised in the South Guide to Life, and the way that they describe the drawl is 1, take your own sweet time, 2, bat your eyelashes slowly and speak at the same tempo, and 3, add syllables wherever possible.
That's about right. So, that's about right. And you can, as a female with a Southern accent and a smile on your face, you can say some pretty nasty things to somebody, and they won't realize that you've been mean to them until about 10 minutes after you walk away.
Oh, bless your heart.
Oh, bless your heart. You can just look at somebody and say, you're a goober, and have a big smile on your face, and somebody will think that you just gave them the biggest compliment in the world. It's not a compliment.
There are other features that I thought would be interesting to talk about. Like, so for example, double negatives. I don't know nothing.
I don't know nothing. Yeah.
Which, to me, it's really bizarre that this is associated with Southern English, because to me, it's just, well, not everywhere, but a lot of people all over the place use double negatives.
Yeah, just poor grammar.
Well, it's not, though. Here's the thing. This, back in Old English, at least the England was kind of split into 2 dialect regions. I mean, I'm simplifying, but in the South, they used double negatives, and in the North, they didn't. And at the time, the Southern dialect was actually the more proper dialect. And so it's funny that somehow that got flipped. And lots of languages have double negatives standardly. So for example, French, je ne sais pas, the n and the pas are both negative. So there's 2 negatives there. Or personne n'a rien dit. So personne is no one, and the na part is nothing or not. and rien is nothing. So it's just, there's lots of extra negatives in sentences. And it's funny that in English, we decided at some point, well, some old white dude decided that's bad logic, because he decided that you were multiplying negatives. And so if you multiply negatives, you should get a positive. But if you add negatives, you get a negative.
So yeah,
So they're equally logical. And this is like just a really dumb rule that we all follow because all of our English teachers told us not to do it.
Yeah, and it marginalizes other groups of people too. So not only the Southerners, but people who speak Chicano English or African American English. All of these types of speaking do double negatives.
I think even just rural English in many parts of the country and Canada too. So it's like, it's just everywhere.
Right.
Yeah, I ain't got no iced tea. We have a lot of double negatives. But now that I know the history of it, I'm going to start using them more and more.
Good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, ain't is a good one. I love ain't.
Ain't, yes. I know you remember when we were kids when you would say ain't a word because ain't in the dictionary, but now it is, so you can't say that anymore. It's an official word, so you might as well use it, right?
Exactly. I mean, that is a silly argument. If just because it's not in the dictionary doesn't mean it won't be yet.
Right.
Language, I mean, dictionaries are constantly updated.
And languages evolve.
Yes.
Yep. Or devolve.
They just evolve. They just change. I guess the word is just change. They don't actually get better and they don't actually get worse. They just change.
Right.
And the other feature that's associated, or I think this is not even actually a real feature, it's just what we think, that Southerners speak more slowly. But apparently that's not even true. Some people do, but it's completely variable. What do you think?
I think that probably comes with the fact that we do draw some words out, so it might take me longer to say certain syllables. But as you can hear in this interview, I speak pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. And you will hear my dad, for example. My dad has a really thick Southern accent, and he speaks so quickly that I sometimes can't understand him. He sounds like he's honking. Like it sounds like a goose or something, which his nickname, ironically, is Goose. But I think that there are two. Both of those things exist. There's the Southern person who speaks really, really quickly, and then there's the Southern, just the really the sweet, slow accent. You know, it takes them a while to say hello, but once they do, you're going to be in a conversation with them, and it's going to be a really fun conversation, and it might take longer than it would, but that's just. You get used to it, I guess, here. I'm guessing in other parts of the country as well, there are probably people who speak really slowly and also really quickly at the same time. But I think the fact that we draw so many of our words out a little longer makes the stereotype exist probably more prominently in the South, because some words do take us longer to say. Yeah.
And then my all-time favorite Southern feature is fixing to.
I'm fixing to go to work. I got made fun of that for that. I sang a lot when I was young and did some public speaking even when I was a young, preteen, even like 9 and 10 and into my early teens. And I was in a rehearsal once, and I think I was in Salt Lake City, Utah. And the sound guy said something to me, and I said, well, I'm fixing to do my sound check. I'm fixing to do it. And he was like, what? You're fixing to? And I had never even thought about that word, because obviously everybody around me used it, and people still use it. I had to start really thinking about not using that one as much as I did at the time. And it's one that I don't use as much as I used to. But I love it, though, because you're like, I'm fixing to do it. What does that mean? I'm about ready to go and go to work. I'm about ready to go make dinner. I'm fixing to do it. I'm fixing myself. I'm getting myself ready.
Yeah, so that sort of leads into what I was reading about it, because I'm really fascinated with the semantics of it, because it's similar to I'm about to do something, but it's not quite the same. So according to Marvin Ching and Jay Myers, who separately worked on this, they say that you need some kind of delay. So if you're saying I'm fixing to make dinner, there's got to be something in between you saying it and then you actually preparing it. So they call it a preparatory activity, which is kind of linguist speak, but
so basically I can't say I'm fixing to make dinner if I'm already making dinner. Yeah, I mean that makes perfect sense. That's exactly how we use it. So he's exactly right. It's funny that he studied that. I could have told him that, and he wouldn't even had to have done any work at all. I could have just told him that.
Oh my God. That is like the linguist problem. Like every time I read something, I'm like, we
already knew that.
Yeah. We've spent so much time looking at this, but we could have just, asked someone who speaks it.
already knew it.
Yeah. Everyone else knows. But science needs a citation.
Yeah, that's true. You can't really just cite the random Southern lady you talked to.
Yeah, but usually you need a few more people. But...
Yeah.
Yes. This is why it's good to have someone who speaks Southern English on our Southern English episode for sure.
Yes.
Well, I wish I had my dad on here now so that you could hear, a really thick Southern drawl.
That would be awesome. Well, so there's lots and lots of other features, but it looks like we already have done a lot of talking. So I think we should just move on to the why we judge it. So part of it we've already talked about, like maybe the dark history, maybe the fact that many people were very poor for a long time, and we love to judge poor people.
I know.
And this reminds me also, so I've been watching iZombie, which I mostly love, but they have this problem where they conflate Southernness with being working class. So whenever they have like somebody who's like rough and tumble on an episode, they almost always have a Southern accent. It's very strange, and it's supposed to take place in Seattle, so these people they shouldn't be surrounded by Southern accents.
Not at all.
Right. I mean, there could be someone or two, but you shouldn't expect like going into a biker bar and having them all have Southern accents.
I think that's probably the stereotype that all of the South is rural, that you're going to have just working class, rough and tumble types of people and nothing else. And, and again, that probably has something to do with political stereotypes now as well, because the South tends to go red and Republican. And I think that there is a stereotype just because of that as well.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, and for a long time, I also just associated like blue collar, the term blue collar with the South too, because I feel like anytime you hear about the South on like the news or anything, I feel like they're talking about something like that, and those two things are always put together in some way.
Because most of the time when you hear stories about the South, you're hearing about manufacturing jobs that don't exist anymore, or about agriculture, which all of those things certainly are very true. But it's like any other place in the world. I mean, both sides exist. Both things exist, but it is easier to, when you're in a visual medium like television, or you're in a medium where you're dealing with time constraints, it's easier to function based on stereotypes than to try to explain the complexity of an issue in a 1 minute 30 story on something, or even in a 30-minute sitcom. You operate based on stereotypes because it's easier than actually trying to write better.
Yes. Oh my God, lazy writing bugs me.
Yep.
Another example of this is Amy Schumer. She uses Southern accents to mock poor people. There's this episode where she's making meth, and she's so stupid and she keeps blowing herself up, and it's so offensive.
No, Becky Lee! No! Oh, jeez. Beck, where are you? Beck!
Skeet.
Holy Moses!
I can't seem to feel my legs, Skeet.
That's 'cause you ain't got none, Beck.
Oh, makes sense then.
so offensive. So there's just these messages constantly in the media that we're supposed to judge the Southern accent. So I think that's why most people do, because we're told to, and you have to interrogate your own biases.
Yeah, right. And I think this is really problematic too, because just like talking about the study earlier out of University of Chicago, these children at 9 years old are already internalizing these terrible messages, like that they may not be as smart, or that the people around them are racist or whatever. And I think this is why it's so shitty one of the reasons why it's so shitty to judge accents, because what does this mean for their self-esteem and for their sense of self? I think that it's really sad. And discrimination based on accent is not illegal in the U.S. So these internalized stereotypes is not inconsequential, right? So it's not protected.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, and one that people probably don't consider and don't think about. And I think it's one thing to consider too for people who have Southern accents, who have jobs that end up in the spotlight, or I ended up in television, or people like, you remember Jessica Simpson when she had her reality show and she has a Southern accent, and she had that whole moment where she couldn't decide if chicken of the sea was tuna or chicken.
Is this chicken what I have, or is this fish? I know it's tuna, but it says chicken by the sea. That's stupid.
And I mean, I think that there's something that we as Southerners can do to counteract those stereotypes. If we end up in powerful positions or positions that have influence, then we should, buck the stereotype and not play into it. I think we've seen too many people play into it because it's more likable, or they feel that it's more likable because it's less intimidating, or it doesn't challenge, and so people feel more comfortable. Because listen, no one wants to be insulted. No one wants to have negative energy coming in at them at all times. And so the first thing that a lot of people do is they try to stay likable before they do anything else, because they just want to feel okay. And I get it. I understand that, but at the same time, it doesn't help when there are people who have these positions of power who have Southern accents who don't. They utilize them to play into the stereotype more than anything else. And I don't know if it's for self-protection or if it's because they make more money that way, or what that is. But that was one of my problems with that show that Jessica Simpson was on, and with the Southern people who have ended up on shows like American Idol, just playing into the stereotype because it seemed likable and funny and it got votes for them or got viewers or whatever. I think that there's a responsibility that you have to get out there and fight for yourself, but also fight for the people who might end up watching you and saying, wait a minute, if that person has a Southern accent and they can end up being in these really great, powerful roles, then I can too. I think and I also think that's why we shouldn't have non-regional dialects on television and nothing else, and why we shouldn't just have Southern people playing the dumb blonde or playing the dumb, the rough and tumble guy or the biker bar dude. We need to have a more complex representation of the human experience, no matter what the regional dialect is, or what the race is, or what the gender is. I mean, we've really done a bad job in media, especially across all of those areas. We stereotype everything from race to gender to religion to socioeconomic conditions. We stereotype across the board.
Yes. I mean, everybody does, but I think it does tend to be a little bit worse in TV.
Oh, the media is it's terrible. That's the industry that it promotes such bad stereotypes across the board. And it was working in news. I certainly saw it more than I would ever like to admit. I mean, there's a real problem here in our country with systemic racism, and I don't think the news media helps in any way, because we're promoting certain kind of imagery, and it breaks my heart. I cried on air several times, actually.
Oh, wow. Well, unless there's anything else that anyone wants to add to the conversation.
I don't know. Anything you think, Carrie?
I think we covered it all, I think.
The main point is not to be an asshole.
Yeah. Right? Just be nice. Just be nice to each other. Hug and talk and laugh and, all that.
And when you do
stuff.
talk, don't fucking judge the way the other person's talking,
Exactly.
Judge for what they're actually saying, not how they say it.
Exactly. Listen to the words, not how the words are being said. Yes. Listen to the actual words.
Yeah. And so thanks again to Beth Troutman for joining us today.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. It was awesome.
Yeah, this was a good first guest experience. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it. Yay.
Now we're spoiled. Okay.
All right.
All right, so
thanks everybody for listening, and don't be an asshole.
Do not be an asshole.
Bye.
Right. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
The Vocal Fries podcast is produced by Chris Ayers for Halftone Audio. Theme music by Nick Granum. You can find us on Tumblr, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Vocal Fries Pod. You can email us at vocalfriespod@gmail.com.